This one's from Nathan, who's very articulate. He's got a great vocabulary here, but he says, or he asks, given the dichotomy between fevered political lobbying in the immediate wake of a crisis and likewise rapid retrospectives demonstrating systemic and legal inefficiency, how can we as a society, and you, as in me and you, Jake, as media, have metered and rational analysis while still mitigating the impact of the resulting media contagion? So let me just give people the concept of media contagion here. There is a theory that mass shootings happen in clusters, as we've seen with these most recent ones, and that part of the motivation there involves media attention on the shooters themselves, that talking more about the shootings and the shooters can actually inspire other people to carry out similar attacks. And so he's saying, like, how can you cover this, have rational conversation about what's going on, and look at policy effects or solutions to the problem without increasing the likelihood that it's going to inspire somebody else to do the same thing. We had a while back last year, I had Professor James Allen Fox from Northwestern University on, who he tracks mass shootings for the Associated Press and for Northwestern. And, contagion theory, I will say, is at least somewhat controversial concept. That sort of raising the awareness of the fact that somebody can carry out an attack like this makes people who are vulnerable to do so more likely to actually follow through on their desire or their thought of committing a mass killing. And some people connect this with the impulse to this is basically like a suicidal impulse, but where somebody doesn't have there's a strong shame culture against suicide, and so instead they carry out some horrific attack that's likely to result in their death. This is one of the theories for why these things happen. And so the more somebody in that state of mind sees that somebody else has done this, the more likely they are to do it themselves. That's the concept. James Allen Fox was dismissive of this idea, and the idea that mass shootings are clustered together. His claim is that it isn't necessarily true, that sometimes these events might happen in quick succession, but if you look at the long history of mass shootings, you don't actually see much correlation in terms of the timing of them. Right. So, other people, there have been studies that show there is an effect. So it's a open question. There's a lot of obviously open questions about mass shootings because they're shocking, but they're also statistically rare form of gun violence in the United States. They make up a very small percentage of the number of people killed in the country each year. But I don't know. It's a good question. If you believe in contagion theory, how do you talk about this responsibly without contributing to the problem itself?
Yeah.
I mean, one thing you can do is avoid notoriety for the shooter as much as possible.
Yeah.
I've made it a policy here to only name a shooter when absolutely necessary for the story.
Yeah.
So basically, in the immediate aftermath, like when and look, we don't cover mass shootings as they break most of the time because we're a very small outlet who focuses on national gun policy, and everybody covers mass shootings. There's not really generally much we can add to the coverage in the vast majority of situations. But otherwise, when we're talking about mass shooters, we prefer not to name them. I don't find a very good reason to name a mass shooter in reporting beyond the very basic initial reporting about who the suspect was, or trying to get information about their background and so forth. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Jake?
Yeah, I was going to say this comes back to a similar cultural and society thing, which is tough to have a silver bullet solution for, because it just takes individual agency to make that concerted effort to not avoid over glorifying the shooter by digging into all these extraneous details. You saw a lot of really bizarre rumors being spread about who this shooter was on social media. I'm not really going to get into it just because it was totally bunk, but basically avoiding that impulse is what's going to be necessary, because that only drives so much more focus on things that don't matter. And as you said, you want metered and rational analysis. And I hope that we've come across as trying to do that in cases like this, where this is obviously a complicated scenario that requires really thoughtful, measured response. So that's another thing, is just lead by example, do your part. Don't contribute to the mayhem that inevitably will happen to a certain extent. And that's really all you can do, is just do your part, and don't reward people that do it the other way, essentially, but with your intention, with your clicks, with your engagement. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah. And I mean, I honestly don't know if not naming the shooters helps or not. I don't know if, the fame gained by these people is a motivating factor. Sometimes you'll get some shooters that say it is. Of course, what shooters say about why they do things should also be questioned, of
right.
course. There's the Buffalo shooter, for instance, talked about specifically targeting a town in New York because of the loose gun laws, right? Which is a common point you hear on the right about, or in the gun owning community about mass shootings, that they target soft targets, right? But then he also targeted a store that had an armed security guard, which he knew. So there's a lot of contradictions. And then you read through his ramblings, which I did usually I do not, but I did in that case to understand how he had modified his gun, because there was a lot of reporting on that, and I wanted to actually understand what it was, because the reporting wasn't very clear on what he had done. But you can see all sorts of contradictory nonsense in there. A lot of it was just copy and pasted from other manifestos or online ramblings. There's a lot of racist memes from 4chan and so forth. Like oftentimes what a shooter wants you to believe about why they're doing something isn't necessarily actually getting at the core of why they did something. It's just, but anyway, I prefer to err on the side of caution, to not give the person any more notoriety than they deserve, which is of course none.
Right.
So only when it's absolutely necessary to a story will we name one of these shooters. So whether that helps prevent other shootings, I don't know, but I don't see a good journalistic reason beyond the initial phase to name these people and potentially contribute to their infamy or their fame. So yeah, that's why we have that policy.